Hello, and welcome to The Kosh. I'm your host, Timber Smith, and The Kosh is a podcast that spotlights people who've had an association with the Kosh and the surrounding Fox Cities area. Kosh listeners, how are we doing? It's another fantastic weekend. I'm happy to be here with you. I hope you are happy to be here with me. Okay, the normal report. Nice outside, little gloomy, little shady, and for timing reference, we are just about to roll up on this eclipse. So the eclipse is going to happen tomorrow, and I don't know how I feel about it. Like, do you really? Here's my thing, in all honesty. Okay, I want to check it out, right? Because I'm all about experiences, and I'm like, okay, if this is something that only happens like every years, or maybe once or twice in your lifetime, or whatever it is, right? I totally want to look at it, but I have a problem trusting what is the equivalent of some 35-cent glasses with my eyesight. I don't trust the game, y'all. I don't know if you trust the game. Now, here's the thing. So, and all right, my wife mentioned it and was like, okay, let's watch the eclipse. And I was like, okay, get us some of those glasses. She's like, okay. And so then she looked around and it, didn't really come up with anything. But then I looked and I was like, okay, I'm noticing here on some of these deal websites online that like Walmart had the glasses literally for 8 cents. 8 cents. And then, this is like them trying to clear it out right before the eclipse. And I'm thinking to myself, that math don't math for me. I don't feel good about that. I'd have rather them sold it to me for $5, and then I might have been like, okay, I believe in that, but 8 cents, nah. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, y'all. So anybody out there, please feel free to contact here into the Kosh and tell us about your eclipse experience, because I'm probably not going to have one. I promise you.
Bruh.
That's just how it goes. All right. Now, down to the real business at hand. Oh, you know what? Let me just remind everybody that this episode of The Kosh is sponsored by our friends over at Sturgeon Spirits Craft Distillery, the Kosh's newest tradition, and Timber's favorite church. I actually just went there, well, like I do every weekend. And this week, they were making these yummy rum cocktails. And they have one that's called the banana something. And I want to call it a run rummer because I went with somebody and they kept saying this term rum runner. And then this is a hilarious story, actually. So they were sitting there and they're like, we want a run rummer. And so then Todd's like, okay, what's in a run rummer? And so they're going through, and because she's like, yo, you don't know what a run rummer is? A run runner is? And he's like, nah, but if you tell me, I'll make it. So going through, we're putting all the ingredients in, and it's created, right? But then when we go back and we look at the menu or what was on the board, it's up there, but they just didn't call it a run rummer or a rum runner. And it was there the whole time, which was the whole point that we were going there. Which I will say is a fantastic, yummy, yummy cocktail. Now, on to the real business at hand. And let me just say this. I am beyond excited about today to sit down with our guest this week because, A, they are an avid listener. They are somebody that when I want to know how things went or how it sounded or how it might be received, I trust them. I haven't known them long, but the little time I have known them, like, there's love, mad love, and respect, great respect. And I was excited when and here's the thing, I've been pestering them for quite some time to actually come and do this episode because they were beyond episode worthy. And I was like, come on, let's sit down, let's do this. And they hemmed and hawed with me and avoided me for a good little minute. But finally, one day they hit me and was like, I'm ready. And I was like, then I'm ready too. And so, what I'm really going to say, Kosh listeners, what I'm really going to say is I do not know how I continue to get these amazing, amazing guests here on the Kosh. And this week is no different. Super excited about this. This week's guest is Juan Corpus. Hey, Juan.
Hey, what's going on? And you know what? As an avid listener, longtime listener, first time guest, I do need to say I've never heard anybody answer your question. It's because of you. You get these great guests because of you. They want to be here. They want to talk to you. They've listened before. Some maybe haven't, but it's because of you. So I'm answering the question, and every time I hear you ask that question, I say it out loud as I'm working out or whatever I'm doing. I'm like, it's because of you. That's the answer. Why isn't anybody saying this? So
I appreciate that. Yeah. And we wouldn't have this without them, and I don't know, the Kosh is definitely, there's been a couple episodes now, and I just feel like we're hitting a point in it where we're getting to real connection, like real stories, real connection, and understanding our neighbors better, just understanding who we live with every day, who we work with every day, and not assuming who they are, actually getting to learn who they are in their real words.
yeah, no, I think that's the key for things is we hear sound bites. People will throw a sound bite out there and we make an assumption. But really, until we sit down and talk to them, do we understand that, oh, we have a lot of similarities. We don't have as many differences. Or if we do have differences, it's because of things that we've experienced that have been different. It's not necessarily, I believe in blue, you believe in green, or whatever it might be. So storytelling really does bring people together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think it's such a connection point. Like, it's universal, right? Because it doesn't matter what culture or where you come from, there's always stories in place that either helped you learn or understand who you were or whatever the point of the story was. But they exist and we all share them. We just don't maybe share the same types of stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I love to listen to the episodes. I've learned so much about just the different community in this area and, Northeast Wisconsin. Identified some folks that I need to connect with just based off of my job, which I know we'll get into in a little bit here. But it is really just seeing another layer of folks that I've met, folks that I anecdotally have seen, and I see them now in a different light because I hear what makes them tick and kind of feel like I know them. Just like in you and I don't get to connect all the time. Maybe once a month we get to see each other in person, but I feel like I know you deeper than that because of listening to this podcast.
I appreciate that. You got a favorite episode?
Oh boy, that's you're put me on the spot. So I'm gonna call out. I know we were talking before we started. Maria Harris and Alondra and her sister. Those were two stories that come to mind for me. Mr. Anthony Miller, really liked his stories, his episode overall, but then his story about being on the football field. Angie Lee, I think that was the very first episode I listened to. That was a great one. I would say there's different parts of different stories or different episodes that really, I'm like, ooh, I need to make a note of that. Somebody had mentioned a walking trail.
Yes.
And I put that in my phone. I'm like, okay, next time I'm down here when it gets warmer, which it's getting warmer right now, I want to hit that up. So I do try to listen intently because there is something normally that I can pick up or learn from that episode.
Yes. All right. I agree with that. Well, what we're going to do is, we're going to get ready to jump in. So, Juan, can you please share a little something about yourself and the connection to the Kosh and the surrounding Fox Cities region?
Yeah, so I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to share my connection to the Kosh. So, and this will be in kind of two parts. So I wear two hats. My day job is I'm vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI for short, for the New North, which is an economic development nonprofit. Oshkosh is in our region. We have 18 counties that we are in charge. I shouldn't say in charge of, but is our scope. The other hat that I wear is I'm a co-founder, vice president of the Latino Professional Association of Northeast Wisconsin, which would include Oshkosh as well. Born and raised in Green Bay, so very familiar with Northeast Wisconsin as a region. Been here all my life. I identify as Latino. My parents grew up in Texas, grandparents in Mexico, so I'm like 1.5 gen, depending on what folks want to say. A father, brother, friend, I'll say collaborator, especially in some of the work that I'm doing. I always struggle with this, tell me about yourself, because I think I'm making a generalization about Latino people, but we don't tend to be very boastful in talking about ourselves. And it's something that I'm trying to work on. So in telling my story, I've gotten easier. Like when you and I connect, I can right off the top of my head, just kind of chat, tell you bits and pieces. when I'm kind of put in this space to talk about my story, I think that's where I am challenged, because what is going to be interesting? I'm thinking about what should I share? Not so much how much or how deep should I share, but what's going to be interesting for folks. So trying to think of what else, to share about me. But, I've been down to Oshkosh, been to the Fox Cities. Again, I'm going to be 48 in June.
Bruh.
We're in the same era.
Yeah, we are.
So definitely very familiar with Oshkosh, but yet in this last year with this new role, there's been a whole nother level of experience with the region.
Yeah, just connecting with the region and learning more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I had some cousins that went to UWO. My stepson graduated from UWO. I've had friends that have gone there. Some, again, familiar with Oshkosh, have been down here for different things. Fox Cities, again, as well. But I feel like now that I'm meeting more of the people, it's giving me additional information about the region.
That's fair. And you know what? I agree with you. It should be the easiest question, but I have the hardest time with when someone asks, please tell me about yourself, because I don't know what I should share. Like, it's confusing to me. And I never thought about it from the way you're saying it, as what's interesting. But I do think maybe that's the turmoil of I don't know. And maybe it is something we as people of color struggle with, because I don't know a culture where boasting gets to be celebrated, right? Mm-hmm. It's usually centers around humbleness and hard work.
That's what I grew up on.
All right.
Yep.
And it's definitely what I grew up on too. And so I don't know, but it is a hard question. Mm-hmm. I am like you too. I've been working at it. I'm still not good at it though, because I never know what. And then I always think after I tell about myself, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should have told this and I should have shared that. But it is what it is. Right. All right. So if you weren't doing what you're doing right now professionally, what would you like to be doing?
If I had the means, I would love to be an angel investor. I see so many in the line of work that I'm currently in. I look at myself as a collaborator, connecting folks to resources, connecting folks to different people that are doing similar work. And I see a lot of gaps with resources. And financial resources is a huge gap, especially amongst our BIPOC communities, whether it's entrepreneurship, small business, whether it's nonprofit work, some of the work that we want to start that we can't start because of funds. So I always tell myself, if I hit the lottery, I know specifically a quarter of my fortune would go into creating some sort of foundation, angel investor to invest into our communities. That generational wealth is definitely something that we as a community, a Latino community specifically, need to get better at. I was just actually down in Milwaukee at a Latino Prosperity Summit that was held by a professional group down in Milwaukee. And what was great about it is they had a lot of younger Latinos that were there listening to these tips to build that generational wealth. Because, again, culturally, my example is I was not taught how to save. We lived paycheck to paycheck, and that was normal for us. And so I would say in my first couple of years as an adult, I wasn't saving. I was kind of just living paycheck to paycheck. I've gotten absolutely better at that. I'm not ready to retire by any means, unfortunately, yet. But I know when my daughter was born, that was something that I started to instill in her, to say, hey, save even 25%. Spend the 75 if you want, but save 25%. So just creating those seeds of knowledge and opportunity, that's what I would love to do if I was not doing what I'm doing today.
Facts. And what you're telling me is that you didn't win that mega Powerball that just
bruh. I did not.
I heard somebody in Oregon won that thing. I was mad because I forgot to buy my tickets, so I didn't even give myself a chance to be up in the mix.
Well, and you see the memes. They say, I wouldn't tell anybody that I won, but there'd be signs. I don't think that there would be signs with me.
No.
So I wouldn't quit my job right away. even at my former job, I just wouldn't quit. I know I hear a lot of folks say, yep, I'm not even giving a notice. I'm like, again, the way I was raised, kind of just my mindset, I wouldn't quit. Don't mind. I would love to have the perks of being famous without being famous.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want people knowing my business and knowing that, oh, Juan won all this. Let's give him a call. No. Hey, do you know we're cousins? You know this?
I'm with you. I wouldn't. I'm with you. I love that meme. Yeah, I wouldn't tell anybody, but there would be signs. My number one sign would be I would be very hard to find on this continent. If all of a sudden you see Timber calling you from like South Africa or something, yeah, that's I might have hit it. You know, if there's some plane tickets that magically show up for you to join him in the Caribbean or Puerto Rico or something, and, you know, there'd be signs.
Well, and I think that's what I think about too. What I think about the different groups in my life that I would want to take somewhere to have an experience. So my immediate family, my friends that I play cards with that I've known for years, the community that I'm building right now. Yeah, it would be great to offer them these experiences and share it with them.
Right. Well, what's the card game? I gotta know. What do we play?
So we call it. So we've been playing cards. I've been playing cards since I was 8, and this was for nickels and dimes. So it's not as pricey anymore. But 5-card stud, jacks are better. You know, when the whole Texas Hold'em craze had hit, we were playing some Texas Hold'em.
I was nice with it.
Okay.
I was okay.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows with me. We have a term that we call carny games. So any sort of game that we can put a wild in is something. So we go things from 7-card no peak.
Oh,
where all the wilds are. There's like 3 different wilds. You got to pay for those wilds. If you get a 4, that's an extra card for money. So anything to do with upping the stakes,
right,
is kind of what we're about. And we've evolved. I think about the conversations that we were having in high school and as 21-year-olds playing cards. Much different conversations as mid-40s, 50-year-olds. And we get done much earlier as well. You know, we see a lot of yawning at 10 o'clock where we weren't starting till 10.
That's what I was going to say. Y'all probably done at 9:30. Now you start at, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. I mean, back in the days, I would get done with work at 9. My buddy would pick me up, change my clothes, play from 10 to 4 in the morning, change my clothes, and he'd bring me to work. That's not happening today.
Oh, no. No, I wouldn't even make it. I couldn't count no cards. I love that. I would love, and it's something, it's something I talk about with longevity, to have a long life, is people who have a good centralized group of friends like that they spend time with in those kinds of ways. You live longer because there's happiness in it. And I need that. I need there's things I used to do. I used to love bowling, but I always wanted to be part of somebody's card group where I could show up every weekend, get some games. And, I'd love a nice little group that played spades. That's kind of I love good spades. I love dominoes too.
Okay.
That would be good.
Okay. I played some spades before. I normally play now on my phone if I do play. Yeah, no, and what's interesting is that evolution of friends, it was all that I would say that I had outside of my family. But as I've gotten older, that's one subset of my community or my circle now. And that's okay. We still have that, we've known each other for close to 35 years, some of these guys.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's good to, it's good to just hang around, retell stories, pick on each other. But it's always a good time. We don't do it as often. Half of them have younger families where there are a lot of sports happening.
Yeah. Kids take over your life.
Scheduling. Yeah. And I was the first one of the group to have a kid. So, I would say I still made a majority of those card games, but there was a couple times that I couldn't go. And, seeing that 30 years later with some of my friends, it's an evolution.
Are you at that point in life that your wife is happy to see you go play cards? Like, go.
I think it depends on the day. It depends on the day. Yeah, some days that I think she'd be okay me staying, and then other days I think she's like, I think she's more of, you need this. She recognizes that I need to be. I'm a homebody, but I need to go out. I need whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So that's the part that she's like, go, because then you'll be more relaxed,
Balanced, centered. Yeah, those things. You're recharging the soul.
Yep.
It's kind of a recharging of the soul. Okay. I want to go back to you talking about what you do. All right. And when I mean that, I think a lot of people, it's, when I first heard about New North, I'm like, I don't get it. But then now I still don't get it, but I get it a lot more because they're everywhere and they're helping in all sorts of things. And I think, can you share a little bit about that and like, how does that work and how do you fit?
Yeah. So the organization itself started in 2005, and it was convened by local business leaders that felt like they needed a stronger presence from an economic development standpoint. I would say, in addition to the local chambers that exist. The main parts of New North would include business development. So when we think about global companies, national companies that want to come to Wisconsin, we have a person on point that will help do the research, share why coming to this region, the New North region, is a great attraction. From a statistic perspective, there is 1.3 million folks in our 18 county region, which is the equivalent to like a San Diego metro area. You think about all the forest, all the waterways that we have. There is a lot that this region has. So it's from a business attraction perspective, that's one way that New North focuses on bringing those businesses here. Another piece of that is talent. You need people to do these things. So we have a talent development team or person. There's 7 people total, but we have one person that's focused on what are different ways that we can attract talent and keep talent in this region. We see the unemployment statistics and the help wanted signs all over. So talent is definitely a scarcity, or it's an ongoing opportunity, I would say, in our region, in all regions. So trying to think of different ways, and there's multiple layers to talent. We think about the kids that are graduating high school. Should they go in the workforce? Should they go to college? That's a subset of talent. You have your recent graduates that are ready to hit the workforce. That's another set. You have, in this changing landscape, you have older, I would say more experienced professionals that are doing a complete pivot in their job. Maybe they were working for a factory and that factory's gotten closed. So now they're pivoting to something else. How do we help that group? We think about veterans coming out of the service. How do we integrate them into the workforce? So talent is definitely something that my work kind of delves into, and I'll get into that a little bit. And then again, even though we're a nonprofit, we have a lot of investors, corporate investors, because we are almost that liaison for the outside business community to bring them in, to connect them. So I'll give you an example. There's a company that wanted to build a huge data center there, and they were looking for a spot. So New North is kind of on point to show why it should create that data center here, because it's not only having that data center is just great for the region, the jobs that developing that data center will be, the people that have to work the data center, it's just all building to the economic prosperity of the region. And how I fit is to give intentionality to that BIPOC experience. How is economic prosperity being attained from a BIPOC perspective? So how are we supporting our Black, Brown, Asian, Native, queer-owned, veteran, women-owned businesses or entrepreneurs? How are we connecting them to resources? Because there's a number of different great resources, but we'll talk about probably entrepreneurship in a little bit. It is daunting. I can't imagine being an entrepreneur, not knowing 5 years ago the information I didn't have. Even now, with the information I have, it would still be daunting. So we can talk a little bit about that. I think about in Green Bay, where I'm from, we're now a majority minority school district with a number of growing Latino students. What does that look like for when they graduate? How is the staff, how is the faculty matching as best as possible those student populations? How can I help in talking to those school districts to attract and retain that staff of color? How are we creating those experiences? How are we connecting folks that even though within a particular company there's not another Latino or another African American in the workplace, we can connect them to a community that can help supplement that. At the same time, as an organization, be intentional to say, you know what, we have talent right in our backyard. Why are we paying a search firm to go to?
Facts. That drives me crazy.
Yeah.
You know, we got to look. Because here's the thing: your retention's going to go way up if you pick somebody who's regional or local, right? They don't have the acclimation challenge that others may have, and it's just a good look. It's just a good look to pull people from your region. They're going to have familiarity and understanding, and all of that matters. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. The math don't math.
It doesn't, and it tells me to me it's a lack of intentionality. And being objective to the question of, are you able to support this community that you want to bring in? So, case in point, there was a organization that was looking to do some outreach to some communities to bring in talent from out of the state. And, you know, as I'm doing some market research with some other BIPOC folks that have done some of this outreach, the first question they asked me was, is that organization set up to support them? And I'm like, that's a great question. That's hopefully something they're talking about. I don't know. I'm just trying to do some high-level research for them. But when I went back to this organization, I did share to say, here's some questions objectively you all should be trying to think about, because, as you said, to bring in talent from your backyard, just less resources, time, money that you're spending versus going to another region where now this person has to deal with a number of things. They're going to have to learn the company. They're going to have to learn the region. If they don't have a family, they don't have kind of that support system.
Right. They got to find a community.
And are you supporting that? And I know a lot of people that have moved from our region. Either they've come here and they've left, or they've left the region because they didn't have that support system.
Right. We don't do what I have found the difference maker to be is does somebody basically welcome you in, like straight up, like, and when I say welcome, I mean like not to your job, but like, hey, let's go out after work. Let me show you where the best burgers in town are. Right. Let me show you where you can get these yummy cocktails and these tacos. And that is the connection point where you can find all the things, right? Like I've done that with individuals and gained some of my best friends from when they first came here and said, hey, why don't you come, let's run together. Let's kick it a little bit. And let me show you where things are here in the Kosh. And that makes all the difference, because then that whole learning curve, they don't have to worry about that. And the next thing you know, they're putting me on the stuff. They telling me, hey, man, you ever been to such and such? Man, you didn't know? Let me tell you. And I was like, okay. But then that tells me like that they're comfortable and that they're most likely to stay because they didn't have to go through this huge transition and learning curve of just life in this region.
And I have a colleague of mine, my friend, Barbara. She was a transplant from Phoenix. And she convened with this group of, I'm just going to generally say 6 folks that were new to the region, women, and now they do dinner periodically. And this group had started years ago when she first moved here. They had found each other as new transplants, and they created that support system that you're talking about.
Well, what I have found, and this is what I hear from people, it's not that we're not a welcoming region, because we are. And it's not like we're telling you can't kick it with us or run with us. But what you have is we have a region where a lot of people have been here a long time, or they've got generations here. You know, they've been here, their family's been here. And then you get your circle of individuals. And what happens is that circle that you run with, your silo that you've built, there's no doors to open for new people. And it's not that you're saying you can't be in here. It's that there's no opening for them to find a way to be in there. And that's what I always hear. Like that people, you know, it's not that you haven't found friendly people. They just, no one is inviting them into their circle, right? Because it's a tight niche circle.
It is. It is. Yeah, that's definitely something I struggled with on my own in looking for a community, where some of those circles either wasn't interested. I was interested in the people, but maybe not why that circle was developed. And so it's something that I'm mindful of as I think about our Latino Professional Association when we have new members, and especially folks from outside the region that have moved up here.
What would be the thing? What have you learned that would surprise someone, like that maybe surprised you while being in this role?
So I'm going to try to go positive and an opportunity. So for me, the opportunity that I recognized is I want to say gap, but the amount of need for collaboration, meaning that there is a lot of great organizations doing great work. A lot of these organizations aren't talking and or haven't figured out how to work together. I'm a proponent of not creating something new if I don't have to.
Facts.
Why don't we collaborate? And so I think that's something that I recognize right away to say, oh, you two aren't talking. You all are kind of doing the same thing. Have you ever had a conversation? So I think that was something that surprised me in that, you know, I came from corporate. I spent 23 years at a Fortune 50 company. And we would see some of that collaboration, lack of collaboration, but you had to. There was always upstream and downstream. There was always, I'm getting from timber so I can take it and take it to Andy. In this space, everybody's kind of in their own silos, doing their work that they haven't had the opportunity to breathe and step back to say, is there any way for me to do this easier? Are there other folks doing this work? So that's been very surprising for me. I think the amount of people that want to do good for the community, not just for their own community, has been a pleasant surprise because you don't see it all the time.
Right. That's true. Okay. Well, I think we dug in. I wanted to dig in a little bit, man.
Yeah,
I just wanted to dig in.
Okay.
So, time for our first segment. And our first segment is what in the world is going on with? This is where I start with the phrase, what in the world? And then you tell us what's on your mind. So, Juan, what in the world?
So I'm going to use a specific example and then I'll broaden it out. So I'm somebody who does 95% of the grocery shopping. I'll say 90. I don't want to discount that. So we'll go to Costco together, my wife and I, but normally I go to the festivals, the Walmarts by myself. I'm very mindful when I have a cart. If I'm in an aisle, I'm hugging the side of the aisle. I'm not right in the middle. I'm going at a certain pace. I'm mindful of the people behind me. If I'm turning, I don't understand how people are so oblivious to their surroundings and are so self-absorbed, whether you're in traffic, whether you're at Costco in the middle of an aisle, like these types of things. I know we're going to talk about pet peeves as well, but this is something that I just don't understand. Like I'm hyper vigilant of my surroundings, and I don't know if that's a tick, if that's how I grew up, but the obliviousness of some people, I think is like, I don't get. And so I want to ask them, like, what in the world is going on with, like, do you not recognize what's happening? Or that's something that every time I hear this question getting asked, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
You're right. And like, you know what? It's not everywhere, right? I think it's the assumed culture of certain shopping environments. So like, I'm not going to lie, there's a superstore where, you know, those people, they ain't moving in the aisle. Like they looking at you like, you better go around me. Like, and you're just like, come on now. Don't do that. Don't, you know, and wait, you've been standing at the spaghetti sauce for about 7 minutes. You done read all the labels. Can we pick one? Can we just pick one so I can pick mine? I'm just trying. And wait, and they got it blocked off, so you can't even like just run and grab it real quick and stuff like that. But I don't grocery shop like that. Now we have the reverse in my house. My wife does the majority of the grocery shopping now. But back when I used to go, which was, yeah, I have feelings about it.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah, just people, like you said, not moving. I will pick up my cart and like hit it on the ground to make noise, to recognize, to say, oh, alert them that somebody's behind you. And then I get the, oh, I'm sorry. And I keep on, going my way. My wife likes to say that, why do you look so mean when you do these chores? And I'm like, I'm not looking mean. I'm just trying to, I'm a mission person. Like, I have my list. I know what to get. Don't divert me from my mission. So yeah, it is something that I'm trying not to get stressed about when I do it, but it is something that there's always one person.
There is. Yes. Or that, here's the other one I see is they have a whole family with them. And so like the cart is the last thing they're thinking about because they're trying to manage a whole lot of other folks. And so then they're just blocking up things, but I can't be mad at them because they're trying to keep up with all the dynamics happening. Right? That's a whole nother one.
Bruh. Yeah, so that is where I'm trying to be very, if there's kids involved, I go two ways. I go, yes, I get it. There's kids involved, like especially when you're dealing with little kids because they're kids. But then two, I think about how I was raised, and I got the warning before we went into the store. Don't ask me for nothing. Don't do any of this stuff, or you're gonna get it. So we knew to stay out of the way.
Oh yeah.
Don't ask for anything. Don't be acting a fool.
Right. Don't be in the way. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yo, you got that speech too.
Oh yeah.
I know that lecture. Yep. I feel like a lot of us know that lecture. I feel like they should just make that into a t-shirt. Don't ask for nothing. Don't grab nothing. Don't touch nothing. Don't move.
Don't breathe.
Don't breathe. That's facts. Right. Well, what in the world is going on with is what in the world is going on with outside organizations coming in and putting their thumb on local nonpartisan elections.
Bruh.
That bothers me. Okay. And so here's where my beef comes in. All right. So we recently had our election, and by the time y'all listen to it, it's going to be long done. But we had our election, and the one that I'm particularly kind of annoyed with is we had an election for judge. I believe it was District 1. There was a gentleman, and there was Lakeisha Hayes, who is an alum here of the Kosh. She's been a guest. She's got actually one of the most listened to episodes. Big shout out to Lakeisha. And just as a person, everything she's out in the community doing, she is nothing short of amazing. That being said, so she's the person who had prior experience. She'd been a judge before. She's engaged in the community. She's currently on our council, or at the release of this recording, she was on council, or at the time of this recording on council, and, just overall engaged into the community, right? I'm not saying that's why she should win, but what I am saying is she's ran 3 times. Recognizable, does good things, was the experienced candidate. Other candidate had not been a judge before, so didn't have that experience. What I heard, and I didn't know this happened until after, was there was outside groups that came in, sent racist postcards into the community, did racist robocalls. And it's like, and it bothers me because this wasn't even, so I'm not trying to suggest anything about the opponent. I didn't hear anything negative about the opponent in that sort of sense, right? But my challenge comes in where, like, local elections are supposed to be nonpartisan. Those outside agitators don't understand our local politics, and then they're inserting partisanship in there, where this wasn't about that, especially like judge. It's about judge, right? I don't want politics in my judge. I just want a great judge who gets our community and understands our community and is representative of who the community is becoming, right? My frustration with that, where it's all, and right now we're in that space. We're in this space where it's not even the locals. It's some outside group that decides, I'm going to come into this community and I'm going to put the thumb on the scale, messing with local politics. And it drives me, it irks me in a great sense.
I've seen similar conversations happening in our local elections up in Green Bay as well, with the same concerns, also from the other side. From both Democrats, Republicans, talking about why this outside money is coming in and how, again, similar to what you said, local politics should be nonpartisan. It's like council, older people, positions, judges are things that really shouldn't engage in those partisan tactics, I'll say. And it's one of those, I don't know if we can put the cap back on the jar. I think polarization of politics from the presidential elections, it is now just encompassed everything. I don't know that you can run for, I don't know if you can run for school president without talking about some of that, or being labeled on one side or the other.
Bruh. Maybe not. Yeah. I don't know. It just frustrates me though, because like your local affects your everyday, so therefore it should be pretty clean about like how a person runs and, how it personally affects, because local is local. Those politics truly do affect your everyday life. Federal doesn't necessarily affect your everyday life. Like I get really frustrated with people that are so worried about the border. You live in Wisconsin, bro. Stop. You don't know. What are you worried about exactly? Makes no sense. So you're judging on that. You don't even leave the state. Just stop. And it frustrates me.
And I think I'm somebody who's never going to run for local election. I have no desire to go canvass. That is something that I have no desire to do. Plus, I don't need anybody digging around in young Juan's history.
Bruh. Facts. I'm with you on that one.
However, if I did, one of the things I would not want is an endorsement from any organization, political organization. And I think what's happening too, or that I saw, is whether or not this person was running independent of political affiliation, these political affiliations were endorsing said candidate. And then it gives this air of, oh, they're this way or they're that way. So we need somebody to combat that, because one side will say, well, that's their candidate. Where's our candidate? And it's this weird web of influence, both local and then outside, that it's going to be very hard to untangle. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a political scientist to offer up any suggestions other than maybe the two-party system is not, we've evolved past that. Or we need to evolve past that, I should say.
I think so. I definitely think, I agree. Yeah, the two-party system has too much power. We should have like a 6-party system or something, like just a bunch of different whoever. My favorite party since I've been a voter is the rent is too damn high party. You remember that gentleman? That dude made me happy because he was a single. He only ran on one thing, but you know what? The one thing he ran on was facts, and it couldn't be argued. And I enjoyed him. He was an interesting character, but I liked it. I liked it because it was so simple and it was so honest, and it was such a clean message to it. But we should have a whole variety of parties that are able to run that you can relate to.
The candidate that I'm thinking of is from a movie. So I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I think some of our old heads might recognize this, is from Brewster's Millions.
Oh.
None of the above.
Mm-hmm. Brewster's Million. You pulling one out there.
I'm pulling one out.
All right. Well, that is what in the world is going on with. Okay. Now, next segment. Next segment is called 21 questions. I love this segment. We don't have 21 questions, but we've got really deep questions that we hope might create 21 answers. You ready, Juan?
I'm ready.
Okay, first question. What are you grateful for?
Yeah, so this is something that I need to get better at, is to be mindful, to be grateful every day. There's a couple of podcasts, yours in particular, and another one where they specifically talk about this question, so it's gotten me thinking about it more. But the four things that I've thought about, one is family. So I'm a father of a 25-year-old daughter, 24-year-old stepson, and a 32-year-old stepson, and then married. My mom is still here. I'm the oldest of four. Have a number, a number of nieces and nephews. So my family is something that I'm very grateful for. We try to get together at my little brother's house now every couple of weeks to do breakfast on Sunday morning. So it is good to just sit around there and just be around family. And so my daughter lives in Chicago, so when I get to see her, it's great as well. Health. So I'm somebody that's on a health journey, been on a health journey for a while. I was always a bigger kid. I look like I'm adopted compared to the rest of my brothers and sisters because I was just a chubby kid, and going out and partying didn't help that. So at one time I was over 350 pounds. We got to be going on 16 years now.
For real?
So I work out now because I eat. So I'm trying to manage that. But yeah, being healthy. As you get older, you have your back pain and your knees are creaking.
Bruh, stop it. It's true.
But I'm thankful. I haven't, knock on wood, I haven't broken a bone. I haven't had any surgery. Health is definitely something that, as much as if I am sore, I think back, I'm like, you know what? You're doing good. You are at where you wanted to be many years ago. So that is something I'm thankful for. My community. Folks like yourself that I've met over the last year, just building this community of folks that want to help all the community, not just our own communities. When I say it's not my professional association, but I think about my community in the Latino Professional Association. We're going on 3 years for that, and the amount of friends that I've developed there has been great. Growing up, my mom and dad, they were kind of, I would say, community pioneers because of the roles that they had at their particular jobs. A lot of newcomers, new arrivals, especially migrant workers, would stop by. They would just get our address from, folks saying, oh, go to this house. They have information to help you out. And they had this group of friends that would call them comadre and compadre, which is basically a term that means very close friend. And I didn't understand it growing up. I just thought, well, I know that's my uncle or that's my tío, but you're calling this person compadre, are they another relative? I didn't get what the term was until I got a little older. I didn't have that growing up. Over the last 4 years, I've developed my compadres, my comadres. So I'm very thankful for that because that was something that I've always was seeking. Going back to our card game, just having that group of people that you can share stories with and not have to give context on. And then the last thing I would just say is opportunity. When I think about maybe what I didn't have when I was younger, I now think back and say, well, what do you have? I had both of my parents. Both of my parents were fluent in English, so I didn't have to go through the struggle of translating for my parents like some of my friends. So I think about these opportunities that I've had, and even though I've had my challenges and my gaps, I'm thankful for those opportunities, and even for being in this current role, because I don't know that I would have met you. I'm sure we would have run into each other at another spot, but just the amount of people that I've met being in this role and having this opportunity to be in this role, I'm thankful for.
What motivates you?
So I wrote down past, present, and future. So the past would be my grandparents, my parents. My family were migrant workers. My dad was actually born in Michigan because that's where the family was when they were picking when he was born. But they were raised back in San Antonio. That was their home base. So I think about being in the fields, and I didn't have to do that. When my dad would bring me to a migrant camp, I'd go out there and just mess around, but I didn't have to do that. And there were kids my age that were out there doing that before school, after school. So that motivates me. The present. Think about my daughter as a 25-year-old and the things that she's doing now that I was not doing at that age, and the courage that she had to move away from home into a large city by herself and do it. That motivates me. And then the future is my nieces and nephews, school-age kids, younger professionals, and the things that they are involved with and the advocacy that they have and their willingness to share that advocacy. That's very motivating. I tell a number of these youngins is what I call them kids. And, I mean, no offense, but just because I'm an older professional, I tell them that they're who I want to be when I grow up because they're out there doing the thing.
Facts. What grounds you?
So I think similar to what motivates me, reality is what grounds me. Whether it's people being objective with me to say, hey, have you thought about this? Like maybe just be mindful of what this might look like. Just the reality of driving through the city and maybe you see somebody that doesn't have the opportunities that you have. It brings things back into perspective. When I see people hurting or that have less than, and I don't know, again, their whole story, so I'm trying to be mindful of that too, and that I'm not just trying to base their whole person on just what's happening at that time, but when people are going through struggle and I see what is that really a struggle for me? Is me getting out this email or developing this deck that big a deal when we have people that are just sharing that they might have cancer and they have a young family? So those types of things kind of snap me back and be like, you know what? This is not the end all be all.
What does success look like to you?
So I'm somebody that if I can get one person in a group to laugh, and whether it's clowning on me or clowning on somebody else, like that's success. Like just making people laugh, connecting people, helping with any sort of guidance. Just adding value really is success for me. It doesn't have to be this big, I think back in the days, I thought about a certain salary was going to make me be successful. A certain job title was going to make me be successful. And looking back, I was happy, but I wasn't, there was always more. It wasn't like the end of the line. So I think now it's about adding value.
What irritates you?
So from an irritation perspective, it's the proliferation of people sharing their thoughts because they have a platform. And what I mean there is that as great as social media is, the amount of people that will respond or comment to something that either A, has no bearing on what the original topic is. So if I'm asking, hey, what's the best taco place in Oshkosh? And somebody comes to me with an Asian food place, I don't understand why you're commenting that. So those types of things. And then the ability or the inability to withhold folks' thoughts. So I think about before the internet existed, and if we saw something on TV or we saw a picture, you might lean over to your partner and say, well, that's dumb. And then that's where it ends. But now we have the ability to go on, log in. Maybe some of us are using our real name. Maybe some of us aren't. And we're putting verbally for the world to see that's dumb with no context. And I think about going back to success, like what's the value of that? Like truly, what is the value of doing those types of things? So those types of things irritate me, and they shouldn't, but because I could just stop reading comments, but that's probably my toxic trait is I'll go right to the comments.
Oh, I do too. You know what else is just, when you put that energy out in the world, it doesn't disappear. Like it transfers somewhere and somebody absorbs it, and then they may expand it or amplify it. And it's like what you're saying is before, maybe you just said it to the person next to you and it's there, but you put it out there into space and you don't know what it could ripple into.
You don't. And I think about what's going on in their space. Like, are they really happy? Like, what's the need? So this is my like psychological, then where my mind goes is what's driving them to say that? Like, I'm not so much, I wouldn't say there are times offended. I'm like, oh yeah, that's like a terrible comment. But I'm more often very curious to say, what drove you to say that? What's going on in your life in breaking it down? But yeah.
What scares you?
I think for me, two things come to mind. I think, because of my family, my daughter lives in Chicago. She's been living on her own since after freshman year of college. So any sort of harm to her, my brothers and sisters, and my mom and my family, like those types of things, like I'm always of the mind, because I'm the oldest, I want to protect them. And I wish that any sort of trials and tribulations I will go through for them. So definitely don't want to see harm come to them. But I also think disappointment, I think, is something that scares me.
What recharges your soul?
So you'll see a lot of intersectionality with some of my answers and some of the stuff that I'm talking about. So anytime that my kid comes and visits, it's a good day. She'll come spend a couple hours with her old man, or we'll go out to eat, or maybe go see a movie or something. But just spending time with her, because we don't get to see each other, and we're not people. The two of us aren't talking on the phone. People we'll send memes to each other and text each other. And I can tell she misses her dad when I get an unsolicited text from her. Normally it's me sending her stuff. So she recharges my soul. And then being in community. So I know you and myself, and we're a part of a monthly get together, and just being on that call, whether it's in person, virtually, being in that space with folks in community is great. Being with my LPA folks, in doing these member meetings, or if we're doing a cafecito or whatever it might be, I'm on a project team with a couple of them. It doesn't feel like work. You feel good.
How do you define love?
So when my wife listens to this, she's gonna anticipate what my answer is. It's complicated. It's beautifully complicated, and it's evolving. Are my headlines of what I'll share. When I became a dad, I became a dad at 22. I didn't want to be a dad when I found out the news. And then when we agreed that this is where we were going, I'm like, okay, I'm all in. This is how, my parents were always there. I'm going to be there. And even the day she was born, I was in the room, and it was very surreal. Actually, I was just telling this story to her a couple weeks ago. My best friend was there in the waiting room with my dad. After she came out, the immediate family was there. People started to come in because they started to let out the news. So I'm like, I'm going to go take off for a little bit, because I don't need to be kind of in here, because it was a unique situation with me and her mom at the time. So I vividly remember we went to McDonald's because I hadn't eaten all day. And then we proceeded to go play basketball with our friends, knowing that I was going to go back at night once everybody kind of did their visiting and spend the night there. And I remember playing basketball and thinking, you're a dad. You're 22. I'm looking at all my friends and the stuff that we're doing at the time, and something switched. It was just my love for her was something that I'd never experienced, and I was, continue to navigate. What does that really mean? Does that mean telling her what to do is what love is? It just means accepting her. I learned from the things that were great that my parents did, and then maybe some of the things that we shouldn't do that. So that's the beautiful piece in, loving a child. It's hopefully all children experience this, but I just know it's not a reality, but the unconditional love that a parent has for their child, I think is beautiful. Complicated. I go from understanding what love is as a high schooler versus a 20-year-old versus now a 47-year-old who's been married for 10 years, completely different. And it's evolved. And the definition of what does it take to love and to be loved, and recognizing that there has to be some self-love in order for that to grow on the outside as well.
Facts. That's great awareness.
And I sound like I'm very aware right now. I am still working through it. My wife is somebody that wears her heart on her sleeve, and I'm the opposite. So that sometimes can get us into some unique conversations. But that something that I love about her is her love for everybody initially and her continuously giving of love to people. So something that I do admire of her. I don't think I could ever get to there just because of how I'm wired and how I'm navigating things. But loving somebody who loves is unique in itself.
One last question. What is the most memorable lesson you've learned from a parent, guardian, or mentor?
So this is a unique question as well for me because I never had a mentor. I was always looking for a Latino mentor because I felt like that's what I needed. I needed somebody that I identified with in order to help me guide me. And so the company that I worked for did not have any local Latino talent. Not until my last 9 months with the company, and I had been there for 23 years, did I find a Latina mentor who was younger than me, which was fine. So didn't have that experience there. Parents, great, but never sat down and said, "Mijo, here's the key to life." There wasn't any of that. It was more actions is what I learned from them. And I really haven't felt like I've had somebody that's put me under their wing. I've had people kind of embrace me into the circle like yourself and others, but I've never really had that, I'll call it older person that's said, "Hey, let me teach you the ropes," or let me kind of point out things. So I've tried to be observant of other guidances. And one of the things that I wrote down was in regards to adversity. Like life is it's never a constant stream. And as great as things can be sometimes, things are going to be terrible. And when I say terrible, that's going to be to your level of what terrible looks like. But how do you navigate that? And the quote that I wrote down was, "Don't ask for a light load, but ask for a strong back." Like we're always asking for things to be easier, but realistically, if things were easy, would we be who we are? Would we be as far as we are? We wouldn't, but it's the pain of that adversity that we think about instead of sometimes the lesson.
Facts. All right. Thank you. This was such a good 21 questions. Okay. We are ready for the next segment. The next segment is called Word Association. This is where I say a word and then you tell us what comes to your mind or what's on your mind. And we have a tradition here at the Kosh, and that is this. We start with the same word every single episode. It is the word of happiness. It is the word of unity. It is the word that when you typically say it, you put a smile on your face, and that word is food.
Yeah, so I wrote down 3 words, and some of that's related to some former guests that you've had. It's energy, right? Just plain and simple, food gives you energy. You need it to survive. Life. When I say life, it's my life in particular has been so centered around food. So growing up, we would go to my grandmother's house every Sunday for breakfast. We would go after church, particularly our family did. And I had 8 aunts and uncles on my dad's side that lived locally, and they would all convene at my grandmother's house, my grandfather as well. And so now add their kids, so all my cousins and nephews. And now we're talking like 40 people deep every Sunday at Sunday breakfast. So for me, I had Thanksgiving every Sunday. And so, the adults sat at the dining room table, the kids sat on the floor on a sheet, which really the sheet really didn't protect you anything from other than crumbs because people were spilling all the time anyways. And then as kids, we would go to outside and play football. There was a side street to my grandmother's house you didn't see a lot of traffic. So I think that those happy memories, I think about were centered really around food. And then I think about the complicated nature with food. You had a former guest, I believe Robert, talked about he's looked at food as strictly just an energy source. Like because of his health journey, that's how his mindset is. And as somebody who's gone through being very heavy to probably need to tighten up the diet a little bit, it ebbs and flows. Like there's things that I love to eat. My mom was such a great cook. I was spoiled in that my mom made homemade flour tortillas every meal, basically. So I really didn't use forks or spoons because I just used my tortilla as a utensil, and that was great, but I probably didn't need to eat 2 tortillas before we had dinner as a prep, and then another 3 or 4 with dinner, and then a dessert tortilla after. So it's complicated in that, I like what I like, but it's the moderation piece that makes it complicated.
You know what I like? You are right. Tortillas are all purpose. You can do anything with a tortilla. I love that. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Cocktail or beer?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of a cleaner word than this, but I am not particular to beer, meaning that anything light, normally growing up, I'm not a IPA, fancy brewery person, so any sort of light beer. There's some sort of Mexican beer, like Modelo or Sol. Corona was a big brand back in the days. I would go with that. From a mixed drink, I used to bounce at a bar, and Captain and Coke was the cheap drink for $1.50. Oh, so that was the drink du jour there. If I'm doing shots, which I'd go visit my best friend down in Chicago, and there's this bar we'd go down to. They'd play hip hop joints. It's just a very chill place, and their special is always for $5. You get a can of Tecate, which is Mexican beer, and then a shot of tequila. And I always get that. I mean, for $5, a shot in a beer, it's in Chicago, like that's cheap.
Are you kidding? That existed? I can't even believe that existed in Chicago.
Bruh. So tequila is my go-to shot. What's interesting, I think, for our region, if you have any listeners outside of the state, is concept of bar dice.
Oh, yeah.
So anytime we would play bar dice, because I was normally nice with the dice, I didn't have to pay for my shots. So knowing that we were going to get a number of them, we tried to go like super light. So you'd go like your Rumplemans, your Pucker, you couldn't constantly do like tequila or, I'm not really a whiskey person myself or a bourbon person. So I would say tequila is my go-to shot, light beer. And if I'm having a mixed drink, it's now Captain and Diet Coke.
Okay. I'm still hung up on the $5 beer and shot. That's like you can't get a shot for $5 now.
Well, and something we were talking about before, and in thinking about, you were talking about your rum runner.
Oh yeah,
at the bar that you go to. Something that I used to make back when I would be part of I'll just call it party committee, when folks would throw parties, is we would make Wap Tui.
Oh, yeah.
Garbage can punch, jungle juice. I'm trying to think of some of the other names.
Oh, yeah. The Wap was rough.
Yep. So I've made a couple of good batches where it was all gone. So, that was always a go-to back in the days.
Yeah, that never turned out well. There is no good that could become of the Wap.
I don't know how much I can handle right now. Maybe only a shot.
WAP, look, I'm going to tell you, I didn't realize why WAP was so bad. It was so good back in the day, but that's because we would go to the local, liquor store, and then we'd buy all the cheap stuff. So there'd be some Mad Dog 2020 that would be bought. There would be a bunch of, anything. We put anything in WAP. Night Train, like all this randomness stuff would go into the WAP, and you're not thinking, oh, this is a horrible idea. This is absolutely a horrible idea. You're just thinking, oh, this is going to be fun and it's cheap. Man, there is no good that ever comes of that.
And the fact that it didn't taste like alcohol.
Normally. Oh, well, no. I tried to make mine taste like Kool-Aid. Matter of fact, I think I put powdered sugar or powdered Kool-Aid in some of the batches, right? We got more sophisticated as we got older, upperclassmen, where, then you might just buy a bunch of vodka and then fruit and add flavors. But before, whatever was on sale.
Yeah.
Throw it into the WAP.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no tried and true method.
No. There's no science. Well, there's a lot of experimenting. That's what I was saying.
Bruh.
Shop local.
Yeah, so there is a coffee place that I've been to in Oshkosh recently to meet somebody. And one of the last guests that you talked about, it's right downtown, and I can't think about it.
St. Elsewhere?
Yes.
Or I don't think it's Saint Elsewhere, but it's Elsewhere something or something elsewhere.
Yeah, it's like half like boutique shop, half like
Coffee
coffee
shop.
space. Yeah,
Yes.
so that's a cool vibe to just have a good conversation and just meet people. When we're talking regionally, Fox City's Half Price Books in Appleton. I've gotten a number of cool books. Not an avid reader, however, just there's books that I've come across there that I didn't even know existed.
Right.
And so going to that place, I'm normally walking out with a book or two, depending on what my interest is. So whether it's professional development, whether it's sports, whether it's fiction, that's always been a cool spot to check out.
Concert.
So I've been waiting for this question.
Oh,
And then,
yeah. Bruh. Let's go.
And I'm kind of glad that we're doing this now versus when I was originally looking to sign up. So last year was, we'll call it high school Juan's dream. So I went to 3 different concerts last year. So I was never a concert goer. If anything, I've been to like mini like concerts to these like at the parks and those types of things.
Right.
I didn't have the means to, didn't have some of my friends were not maybe as excited to go to some of these concerts. I was somebody who didn't have their license until they were 22.
Okay.
So I had to get a lot of rides. So last year on my birthday at Summerfest, we went and saw Cypress Hill. So that was something, you know, again, as a young high school Juan, even actually middle school, to see them, that was great. Then I went to Minneapolis with my little brother, and we went and saw De La Soul, Nas, and Wu-Tang.
Bruh. You could have called somebody. Man, look, did we know each other back then? Because you could have called. Because I'm about that life.
So it was either going to Minneapolis for that concert or going to Chicago around that same time. And I chose to go to Minneapolis. Wu-Tang was one of those groups. For my little brother as well, which we kind of all like the same music, me and my brothers, and even my sister. But we never really, I think we kind of had our own like favorites. Right. And I didn't realize that one of his favorites was Wu-Tang until he got older, and he has like a half tattoo of the Wu-Tang W. But yeah, that was something that when it came up, I'm like, I have the means, I have the opportunity, like I'm going to go. And to see a lot of the folks our age there enjoying themselves. Yeah, it was great. They had a DJ kind of playing in between and getting that crowd hype, and just the music. Honestly, the DJ alone could have been a separate guest or an artist, because the tunes that he was playing and getting the crowd hype. Yeah, that was something great, because Cream is one of my top 10 songs. Like if I'm on an island, and the list varies, but Cream is consistently up there. Something about the piano beat. You don't even need the words, like just the instrumental alone. Mm-hmm. And then the other concerts that I went to last year, that's probably a surprise for I think a lot of people that don't really know me. I went to Depeche Mode,
bruh,
in Chicago.
What? See, I'm feeling that because I'm 80s, right? 80s was where I listened to like a lot of music. I used to listen to Casey Kasem, and I love 80s music. And Depeche Mode, they were good. They were tight.
They were. Again, some of our listeners, I'm going to say our listeners because of the episode that I'm on, might not believe that we actually had to listen to cassette tapes.
Bruh, why you busting out the cassette tapes?
But I vividly remember having the Violator cassette tape from Depeche Mode. That was my first Depeche Mode tape. Now, I knew some of their other older songs from the radio, but I would listen to that whole tape album on repeat. And again, another top 10 song for me from them particularly, which is really my main motivation to go, was just to see that one song. Although, because I don't know their whole discography. I know their popular songs, but Enjoy the Silence by Depeche Mode on that album. That song is, again, another top 10 song. So last year, from a concert perspective, yeah, I was kind of living my high school, middle school dream and kind of going to those things. So.
You went and kicked it.
Well, and I went by myself to that Depeche Mode concert.
Oh, for real?
I drove down after work, went to the concert, drove right back, and I can't remember what I had the next day. I had a work thing, so I made the jaunt, spend more time in a car than actually sitting at the concert. But yeah, it was, I'm glad that I went. Just never been a concert goer, but when I've gone, it makes me realize, why don't I go to more? So I just was on Thursday, I was at Los Lobos, was up in Green Bay.
Oh.
And again, don't know their whole discography, but I'm a nostalgic person. So I go for there's always one kind of flagpole reason that I'll go. And the only movie that my whole family went to together, because we just, again, didn't have the means to do these things, was La Bamba. Mm-hmm. Again, cultural representation, even though you had a Filipino playing a Mexican, which we didn't know about, right? Back then, there wasn't social
I didn't
media.
know that either until you just said it now. Yeah. I just learned something.
Yeah. But I remember vividly going to the movies, and then we went to Kmart right after, because there was a Kmart right next door, and we bought the soundtrack. And again, talking about cassettes, people might not remember, but when you had to buy cassettes, these stores would have them in these long, elongated plastic carriers to prevent people from stealing them.
Yep.
So, yeah, so that was my first introduction to Los Lobos. And so when I saw that they were coming up, I'm like, let's go check that out.
I remember that movie. That was one of the movies I watched when I was young on repeat. I watched that movie quite a bit. It was a good movie.
Good movie.
Yeah, it was a very good movie. I'm going to say that in my adult years, that was taken over by Selena. Selena was always on. And I love that movie. That movie is so good. And, that was before I knew who Jennifer Lopez was, which once I figured that out, that changed the game too.
So Selena, interestingly enough, this was 8th grade. Again, I go by memories, these nostalgic memories, but my parents would get videotapes of the Tejano Music Awards, which was basically the music awards in Texas. Tejano is another word for Texas or Texan in that genre of music. And somebody had taped that award show where she had performed and brought it up. And that I remember playing that, and my mom introduced me to her back then as saying, yeah, this is the Mexican Madonna, is kind of how they would talk about her. So that was my introduction to Selena, and then shortly after, unfortunately, she passed, and then her legacy skyrocketed because of that, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's a sad movie. Yeah. Streaming. So I'm a streamer, whether it's audio. So from an audio perspective, some of the podcasts that I listen to are the Kosh. I'm an avid, not trying to. Yeah, I'm on here now, but again, I was an avid listener. Any kind of pulp culture podcast. There's a couple of cats that I listen to from LA called Chicano Shuffle. I've been following them for a couple of years. Comedy podcast person. And I think in our work as well, from a DEI perspective, I think it's interesting the dichotomy of comedy and DEI work, in that some of the comedy, like a Dave Chappelle and some of these other folks, that some of the topics they talk about, I think there's a segment of people who see humor in some of those topics, they assume they think one way. And I think as me, in my experience, comedy, if the goal is to make people laugh. Mm-hmm. I don't see comedy as people of truth sayers or these philosophers. It's to make people laugh. Now, you can make people laugh and not act on those things. And I think there's this separation that people can't navigate. I shouldn't say can't navigate, struggle to navigate through. So again, that's why I love listening to podcasts, comedy podcasts, and make me laugh. And you also hear a little bit about their stories too and what makes them tick. And then wrestling podcast. There's been a proliferation of podcasts overall, but specifically in pro wrestling. And you see some of these folks that I was watching years ago now have their own podcast and telling the behind the scenes stories, which I think there's something about those behind the scenes stories. Oh, I love those behind the scenes stories. Those are the best stories. It's funny. Because I do that with YouTube, what you're talking about with podcasts. I do it with podcasts too, but I do it with YouTube. And when you get to hear these snippets of these stories, because you've only seen these people, whether it's a sports star, movie star, rock star, whoever, right? And then you're finding out these things that happen behind the scenes, like what happened at this concert or how did this come to be? And you're just like, and then you're like, look, you know what? We all live through some shady shade at some point in time. And those are the best ones I love. It's like when there's like, oh, I didn't realize it was that shady. Those get me. I listen to especially when they do those nice little snippets, like the nice little 30-second snippet, and they tell the quick story about something, and you're like, oh, okay. I never saw that comment.
Yeah, there's I know a new crop of basketball podcasts.
Yes.
I mean, I always catch the clips, and I can't think of the podcast, but Channing Crowder, Ryan Clark, and Fred Taylor, their podcasts. But it's in my algorithm that their clips will show up, and I'm just running out of bandwidth of stuff to listen to.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's new podcasts popping up all the time. Competition stiff out there, Juan. Competition stiff out there. All right. Next word. Entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So I think for me in the last year, I've gotten a deeper understanding of entrepreneurship, the challenges with entrepreneurship, the value of being an entrepreneur as somebody who worked in corporate. So I'm definitely envious. Folks that can go out and be their own boss is definitely something that I'm very envy of as I've gotten older. The challenging road to being an entrepreneur. This is something that I recognized right away, I think, when I started this role. What's the blueprint to be an entrepreneur? And there isn't one. And as from a resource perspective, there's an opportunity for our resources to meet entrepreneurs where they're at instead of expecting them to
find you,
follow the plan. There's a mutual friend that we have. His cousin is an entrepreneur and was looking for financing to start a trucking business. And the connections that this gentleman had gave him a leg up. And even his journey has been a struggle. And I think about these folks that don't have these connections, that don't know the people of who to ask, how disheartening and frustrating it has to be. So when I see an entrepreneur, I want to say sympathetic's not the right word, but I envy them and I have more feeling for them because there has to be a grind to that I can't imagine.
Oh, yeah. I don't think everyone understands. Well, I don't think anyone can understand what it takes until you're in it and you're doing it and what that commitment is to actually start your own business and actually maintain it. Like, that's some serious stuff. And you're right. I think we're in a unique time where there is a number of resources out there that will help you figure some of it out. The trickier part is finding those resources.
It's, one of the wants that I had thought about is making a roadmap, and almost a roadmap of you're at the ideation stage. And some people are at an ideation stage. Some people are making the product in their home. They have a food cart. They have a food truck. They have a brick and mortar, and they want to expand. Like, there's all these different stages. And unfortunately, sometimes these reasons or these resources are go to this resource A. Well, resource A might only apply for the ideation stage folks. And it doesn't apply for the folks that I'm doing great, but we need to expand.
Right.
And I think that's the piece that I wish we as a resource community could better lay out for these folks.
You might know that you're ready for the next step. You might not know what the next step is.
Yeah.
Or who can help you get there. That's such a good point. Last word, diversity.
This one was a challenge. No. So I'm going to, again, start with my headline, my words that I really immediately wrote down. Life-sustaining, needed for us to evolve, polarizing, and misunderstood. When the people in anywhere hear the word diversity, it would probably be very few of us that would have the same vision of what that word means. And I think that is what contributes to polarization to begin with, because there's now a new term in certain spaces that's becoming popular regarding DEI. Maybe you've not heard it yet, or it's made its way into your world, but it's DEI equals didn't earn it.
Bruh.
And so I find myself in normally spaces where folks agree with the concept of DEI and why we need it. Having not just about Black, Brown, Native, Asian representation, certainly a huge part of it. Representation absolutely matters, but there's diversity of thought, there's neurodivergent, there's all these different layers of what make us what, whether people are veterans, whether they're entrepreneurs or not entrepreneurs. Our family dynamics are different. I'm a part of a blended family. My wife was previously married, so my two stepsons are from that marriage. My sister is a part of a traditional family. We grew up in a traditional family. So there's all these different things that make us who we are. So when I think about diversity, it really depends on where I'm at. And for me, as a logic person, I don't understand at a core level the pushback to diversity. If you had nothing at all but a bologna sandwich with nothing else every day, morning, noon, and night, I don't understand how that's life fulfilling. You need to add some chips to the side. Maybe you need some condiments,
some mustard.
If you want mustard. See, I'm a pretty plain Jane when it comes to like a bologna sandwich. I was a cheese and lettuce type person. But give me my cheese and give me my chips. But yeah, just those types of things from a diversity standpoint, I go back and forth, and I really haven't had to defend it as much as I anticipated having to defend it, because I think people who I talk to are more open to have a dialogue about it. But I also am not naive enough to think that everybody that I talk to agrees with it either.
I don't get what there's to agree with. My messaging has centered around this, and I've consistently kind of held this messaging since I've been in my role, and that is this: you're DEI too. So the rest of it doesn't make any sense to me, because we all fall under this umbrella. We all have identities. We all have, these different identities that make us who we are, how we connect. And, when I talk or present and I start pointing it out to people, and I'll sit and say, hey, how many of you are wearing glasses? Guess what? You're DEI. How many of you have hearing aids? Guess what? You're DEI. How many people struggled up those stairs to get here today? Oh, guess what? Mobility, you're DEI. And I just start ticking off the list, because where I think the biggest conflict comes into play is when people are able to other it, when they think it's for everyone else but them. But then the minute you can show them that they are it too, I've literally stood in rooms and watched the wheels turn. And then those feelings don't feel quite the same, because then they start thinking about, and sometimes you got to connect the dots, right? Sometimes you got to connect the dots. I'm not saying this happens all on its own or by itself, but then they start thinking about, okay, I have hearing issues, and this place put in a hearing loop. My church put in a hearing loop so people can hear. I guess they're making concessions for my DEI too, so I can fit and I can, right? Large print things. I guess they're making DEI concessions too. I don't know what you've got to earn. That's the thing. So that's always been my approach. And I think the more we show people that this isn't for the others, this is for you too, that truly changes the whole conversation for me.
And to add to that, I think we, not just you and I, but somehow we need to figure out, how do we continue to have these conversations, to have that, to not say it's a scarcity mindset, to mean that, if Juan gets this, that doesn't mean that I'm getting less.
Yes.
And I think that's the part that the folks that I feel like need to engage in that conversation.
Yes.
Aren't always the folks that come to the table to have that conversation. Frequently, I've been a part of doing DEI work, quote unquote, since 2009. And you normally would see the same people at the same events.
Correct.
And so I think with this role, I'm now more experienced to know that, okay, everybody that I'm engaging with might have different viewpoints on that. So how do we get to a level concept and create that understanding that this is going to benefit everybody. And it's not you're not giving something up to give to somebody else. That's not what it's about. And unfortunately, that's the narrative in certain spaces.
Yeah. And I feel like it's a made up narrative because it's not even reflective of what has happened, in most of the spaces where, these kinds of things were introduced. Who ended up actually getting an opportunity to utilize these new things that were put in place often is never the people they think it is.
And if you just look at just history, if we didn't have just diversity of thought, we'd still be listening to 8-track tapes.
Why are you bringing up these 8? Now, you done went cassettes. You done brought up 8 tracks. Man, you busting us out, man. You putting everybody on notice about how old we are.
You need to know where you came from in order to where you got to go.
That's the facts. That is the facts. Okay. Well, next segment. Next segment is called The Kosh Hidden Gems. This is your opportunity to share a hidden gem. This can be something everybody knows about or something no one knows about. But maybe there's details that are important in there. So, Juan, what's your hidden gem?
All right. So I tried to go local to Oshkosh and the ACW Wrestling Convention. It takes place normally in May. ACW is a local wrestling promotion that I believe is owned by a former WWE wrestler named Hornswoggle.
Yes.
And it's been held at the Oshkosh Arena was the first time I went. It's been held at the convention center. I don't remember where May's is going to be held. I think it's the convention center again. But they bring in local talent that's a part of the federation, but then they also bring in legends, for lack of a better word, to do meet and greets and maybe participate. And it's something that had been going on a couple of years before I found it. And now it's something that I come down with my brothers and we take our nephews to go to. So again, something local where you can see some more popular folks that normally wouldn't make it up to this region.
I like that one. I think they've had a couple of them at the Masonic Temple.
They do have events there, yes. I think their normal run of shows I do see advertisements for that.
All right. Hey, I might want to go to one of these. Now that you brought this up, I'm kind of getting hype about previous to us start recording, we were having some conversations about wrestling. I don't know about you, but I was an avid wrestling fan from all the way back in the day. Now, if you really want to talk about it, let's talk about it. I go back to the AWA. That was the Crusher and Baron Von Raschke and the Iron Sheik, like the Greg Gagne's and them. Like if you really know wrestling, that's that real old school.
It was. I was fortunate when I discovered wrestling. There were 4 different wrestling shows that I could watch. So there was AWA, there was the WWF, there was the NWA, which was down in Georgia. It was on the Superstation on TBS. And then on one of these channels, I can envision it, but I can't think of the name, but we would get the promotion from down in Texas with the Von Erichs.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about them.
Yep.
Okay.
So folks might be familiar with that name from the movie The Iron Claw that just came out. So, yeah, I would watch all of those. Went to one show as a kid. Didn't go to any AWA shows, but I do remember watching it. And, yeah, I've been watching for quite a long time.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good experience. There's a show that I go down to, my wife and I. We've invited some friends to go in the past, but it's down in Milwaukee. They call it Mondo Lucha.
Oh.
So it's a once a year. It's I would call it crowning jewel event. It is it's wrestling. They have a band that's on stage, and then burlesque. They have some burlesque performers, and it's a vibe. It is, like, again, found it randomly. My wife and I went, and we've gone now ever since. I think we maybe missed. They didn't have a show the COVID year, and maybe the year right after we might have missed because we were somewhere, but we go every year. And it's just a good time. And again, for those that are talking as they're listening to us and saying wrestling's fake, movies are fake too.
Wrestling's entertainment.
It's entertainment.
That's what it's supposed to be.
It is scripted stunt work. It's, soap operas with real life stunt work is what it is.
Look, first of all, I don't care what any of these people say. The one thing you don't want to run into some of them wrestlers in a dark alley or in a dark street, because guess what they ain't? They ain't no joke. I don't want those problems. No, at all. No, I love me some wrestling, but I had to stop. I quit when Stone Cold kind of got out and The Rock got out, because to me that was the epitome. That Stone Cold Rock in that whole era right then was that the Attitude Era of WWE. Like, oh my God, I felt like that was the best. That was just some of the best talk work, promo work.
It was. And for those folks that are watching today, they're referencing the promo work is reminiscent of that era. Yeah, and I watched with my brothers. We would tape one show during the Monday Night Wars. We taped one show and we watched the other live, and then we would watch what we taped. So there was 4 hours on a Monday night of wrestling that we would watch, and we loved the heels. We loved the promo work. If it would make us laugh, we were always, me and my brothers, just laughing at just the comments, the commentary.
Oh yeah,
we were entertained by it.
You are entertained. You can't help it. Yeah. My favorite and my mom's favorite wrestler, Macho Man, because it doesn't get better than him. That dude, he was just the best at it. He was the best at it.
I mean, he's still iconic from a meme perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Just some of his promos. Yeah, my mom was also a fan. So when there are stories that are happening now related to folks that she watched back in the days, we kind of keep her up to date. And yeah, no, it was fun. So I'm going to ask you a question, because I know what the answer is. You can ask me the question back, but would you be a heel or a baby face?
Oh, I'm going to be a heel, hands down. It wouldn't even, there's not even a question.
So I would think that you're a tweener, because I don't know that I've seen qualities of heel come from you. And maybe as we engage more, I'd be like, oh, okay, there's heel timber coming out. I'm absolutely 100% heel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would play it kayfabe in the ring and outside the ring. And, my wife and I, we kind of joke around. I'm like, I don't know that you can handle me being a heel, because the way social media is now and the way they talk to these people.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that she could separate that, they're commenting on my character. They're not commenting on me.
Right.
Because I think she's, again, her love for me, I think she'd want to defend me.
I guess, let me say it like this. What I would want to do is I would want to be the heel that was such a good heel that everybody loved them, right? Because I do feel like there's certain people that have pulled that off, right? Where they're just so good at it that you can't help but to just cheer them on as the heel. It's kind of like Thanos. Or because that's where, see, my favorite people in Marvel or in comic books are all villains. I love me some, Dr. Doom is top of the pyramid for me. Thanos, man, when Thanos was in those movies, how could you not cheer for Thanos? I want to be that person. Maybe I don't want to be the over, just bad for the sake of being bad, but I want to have that guiding light where I'm bad for a purpose.
Well, and they say all these villains, the best villains or the best heels believe what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're right in their mind. They're not necessarily crazy.
Right.
They're just very devout to their truth.
Right.
Yeah. I think for me, the ability to get on the mic and get people to boo you.
Oh, yeah.
There is something about that would give me energy.
Oh, yeah.
The closest thing that I've had recently, I was at a conference, an Indigenous business conference, and it was during the Packer Raider game, which was on Monday night. And so they said, hey, we're going to have a Packer party at night. wear your Packer colors. And I'm a Raider fan. I'm not a Packer fan. So I brought my jersey. Wasn't sure if I was going to wear it. I only knew a couple of people at the conference. So I'm like, you know what? This is my team. I'm going to support the colors. So I put it on. And as I'm walking down to the area, you see all the green and gold. And everybody's kind of looking at me. And they're saying, you got the wrong jersey on? I'm kind of laughing at it, whatnot. And then a couple of people I did see me, they're like, I didn't know that you were a Raider fan. I'm like, yep. And so I'm watching the game. I'm the only person. Except for one. There was one guy who sat down next to me. He's like, I saw the Raider jersey. I'm a Raider fan too. And I had to sit at the table. He's like, but I wasn't going to wear it. He's like, he was too scared to wear it.
Oh, no. You got to wear it.
So I only stayed down for the first half, but the Raiders had scored first. And, of course, I cheered. It was kind of on a bigger screen. And, as I was cheering, people started to notice, like, who's the Raider fan? And I started to hear a couple of boos. So then what did Juan do? He stood up and he did the Hulk Hogan, like, let me hear some more. And I was bringing it. I was calling it on as people were just booing louder and louder. And I was laughing. And it was just a good feeling. So I think that gave me a glimpse on what heel wrestler Juan would be on the mic, just adoring the amount of boos that were coming.
Well, boos and cheers aren't any different.
Hey,
it's when there's silence. That's what you don't want.
Absolutely.
And they'll tell you that. Oh, I love this. This is so good. Okay. Well, at this point, though, we need to take a small commercial break.
Did you know there are children in the Fox Valley in need of hearing aids, but their parents struggle to provide them because of lack of insurance or high copays? I am Juliet Sturkins, audiologist and board member of Here in the Fox Cities, and proud that this small local nonprofit organization has helped fund hearing aids for some 30 kids. Your donation would help more children hear. Visit hereinthefoxcities.org to learn more and to see their smiles. Every child deserves to hear.
Okay, we are back. And we are back with what I want to say is my favorite segment of the Kosh. I always, I'm not going to lie, I get so geeked about this. And that is, this segment is called Story Time. And Story Time is an opportunity for our guests to do nothing more than just tell the Kosh listeners a story. So, Juan, what do you got for us?
All right. So I'm going to retell a couple of stories, actually. And these are stories that I've recently heard about others' experiences. And it goes into the conversation we've had about DEI. And the first is about Jacque Machado. He's a Brazilian grappler, MMA, won numerous awards for his grappling skills. And what's unique about his story is on his left hand, he only has a thumb and I think one finger, and the rest he didn't have. It was part of a birth defect. And what he was able to do was to develop these grappling techniques, because in his sport, the people wore gis. So he learned different submission holds using those two fingers on his hand, and he developed new techniques that are now used by everybody. And it was his experience of having that, I won't even say limitation, but just that different left hand from most of us that created these techniques. And had he not had that, the wonder is, would these techniques have been created? So I think those types of stories just show that this is why the diversity of our experiences is so important and how they can benefit everybody. The other story has to do with the history of curb cutouts. So if you're looking outside your window as you're talking and you live on a corner, you'll see the little ramp. I used to call it a ramp. I didn't realize it was actually called a curb cutout.
I didn't realize that either.
Yeah. But these curb cutouts didn't always exist, which is kind of funny to think about now as you see everybody use them. But the story is, there was a gentleman who was born with polio in Michigan. He ended up going to school at UC Berkeley, California, Berkeley. And he was in a wheelchair, and he was trying to advocate for I'm in a wheelchair. How am I going to go up and down? And he wasn't getting the movement from the government, local government there at the time. So him and his friends would go at night and create these curb cutouts. And there was some pushback because I think people were saying, well, how many people do we really have in wheelchairs that we need to build this for? And if you think about it today, who doesn't use a curb cutout?
Everybody.
If you grew up riding a bike, could you imagine not having, again, I rode a bike all the time, but I was not the kid who would jump off the curb and then jump onto the other curb. You know, parents with children pushing
strollers big time.
You know, think of the delivery folks that they have their little
Dollies.
Their dollies. So just the amount of benefits and value that we have all seen just from this one lens and experience. I think those are the things that when I think about diversity, and just those stories are super cool to me because, again, it shows that it's bettering everybody. It's not just bettering one segment of people.
Right. That's exactly it. Like when you make it better for one, you make it better for all. And it's not an us versus them. And it's not because they have this. Now I lose something. What was lost? What is usually ever lost when we do better by taking care of each other and helping to make things, you know, just more livable for whoever we are or however we identify or whatever our personal character or identities are.
Yeah. So those two stories, like I said, you know, as somebody that was thinking about stories and trying to be mindful to keep the people protected on some of my more funnier stories, I thought these two were things that stuck out to me that I wanted to share.
That has to be the best statement I've heard a storyteller tell is like, I can't tell these real stories because I'm trying to keep the people involved protected.
And I might be or may not be one of those people that I'm trying to protect.
That's fair. That's fair. Look, I get that, actually, because I'm always saying that. Look, and that's why I can't run for office either. I don't need people digging at me like that. That ain't no good. I really like those examples, though. I didn't know about the wrestler and the curb cutouts. Like, first of all, I didn't know what they were called. But, yeah, everybody, they're useful to everybody for whatever reason all the time. So, I don't know. I just think they're excellent examples. So, okay. Well, now it's really time. All right. And every single time, I love it. I love it. I love it. It is time for Topic of the Week. This is the opportunity for our guests to share their topic with us for the week. The topic of the week is chosen by our guests 99.9% of the time. This week is no different. So, Juan, what do you have for us?
So we've been previewing this topic through our conversation. It's pro wrestling. And the reason that this was the topic is because if folks aren't familiar, this is called the WrestleMania weekend. So the largest entertainment company, pro wrestling entertainment company, holds their Super Bowl.
Bruh. Facts.
And now it's a 2-day event. It used to be just on Sundays, but now it's a 2-day event. And night one was last night, and night two is tomorrow. Or excuse me, is tonight. And the reason that I want this to be a topic is I've heard you talk about it in the past. I've heard more and more people that I wasn't aware were fans either now or in the past. And I think sometimes all it takes is just one person to mention it to say, oh, let me jump in that conversation, because like the Depeche Mode, I don't know that you and I would have even talked about that had it not been for this conversation.
How?
Right.
How?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, not to get into too much of the pro wrestling that we've already talked about, the two things that I think about, one is what I love about it as a kid, even to now. You know, I've had my stages where I've watched all the time, and then I've had my stages where I paid attention to the fringes. And then I think it's how it imitates life.
Bruh.
And as a kid, you had your good guys and bad guys, and it was pretty clear cut. Era you're talking about in the late 90s, it started to bleed over. Like the good guys were kind of the bad guys, and the bad guys were kind of the good guys, but at the same time, it reflected more of our society.
Yeah, you couldn't tell. I mean, seriously, Stone Cold, was Stone Cold good guy or a bad guy?
Well, he started off as a bad guy. He had always been a bad guy. And in some people's mind, he was still a bad guy because he wanted to beat up his boss.
But in some people, he's a hero because he wants to beat up his boss.
Exactly. And then, you have The Rock, who was arrogant, but he was proud of himself and his accomplishments. And and people would go through these stages of, I really like them, I don't like them. And so it really does imitate what's happening around our world. If you think about politics today and you hear these people with their speeches and their sound bites, that's pro wrestling promos. There is some conversation out there, and I think people have written some dissertations about this, about how President Trump, he had spent some time, he had been affiliated with the WWE. Mm-hmm. The Trump Plaza hosted a couple of WrestleManias, 4 and 5.
He was in one, wasn't he?
He was in one, as in the corner of one, and there's some folks that believe that stint, the last time he was a part of WrestleMania, was what gave him kind of the template for his current monologue / speech / promos. And you can see it. You can see that he's playing to his base, which anybody, I should say, that's out there stumping is playing to their base. It's not just him. But that is a wrestling promo. You want a reaction. You don't want people to not respond.
Right.
Obviously, you want people to vote for you with their voice, but there's a lot of imitation of life in just the stories that are being told, and it's also problematic. So things that we were watching back in the days in the 90s and even before, and how tropes were being reinforced, I didn't recognize that back then, but now I'm like, oh yeah, that wouldn't play today because our society has evolved. Mm-hmm. And so it's not about woke culture or cancel culture. I just think we know better and we're trying to do better. Is it always to the level we want it to be? No, but you can definitely see those instances. I mean, you look at women's pro wrestling, now they're being featured for their athleticism versus in the late 90s. There were certain skits where it was very visual and the stuff that they wore, and even, years before then, they were considered more of a novelty.
Right.
So it's evolved. And again, should it have always been athleticism? Absolutely. But that's just not how our society works. So I think there's a couple of things that I like about it. There's an art form to it. I think if somebody can really elicit a reaction, I'm very interested to understand the dynamic to say, okay, is it the people? Is it this person with what they're saying? I'm a nostalgic person, so I think a lot of the things I've experienced in the 80s probably are the foundation of what I like today. And I don't know, maybe there's a secret part of me that wishes I was a heel and I was getting all the booze.
You can still be a heel. Yeah, I mean, hey, look, you could be maybe it's not getting in the ring, but there's always a good manager can make for a lot of great moments in professional wrestling.
That is true. Well, and so I'm the oldest. I have a sister and two brothers, and my little brothers, I call them, would watch, and they shared a room, and so we kind of laughingly joked that they would be the tag team and I would be the single. Oh. And that would be, again, a good story with us. And I think we're just, we just want to make people laugh. And any sort of promos where people are running down a city or running down a town, I don't know, it's just so entertaining to me.
I'm never going to be able to look at a Trump speech the same again now. Now that you've said this, I'm going to be thinking wrestling promo, because now that you say that, you're right. Because we've gotten to the point that what is said is not important. It's the emotion that's elicited that's the important part, right? And I mean, that's the beauty of a wrestling promo. A wrestling promo, you say anything, right? But it's about eliciting the emotion to your base or even the people that don't like you, because you're still winning as long as there's emotion.
And if you end up losing your particular match or your battle or what it might be, the inability to admit fault, that makes you more of a heel, which plays more into your character.
Right.
You don't admit mistakes.
No.
Or you say it's the ref's fault, or it was the crowd's fault, or the commissioner, or you assign blame to everybody else but you. That's like heel work 101. So I mean, I think that's where people think about like the Hulk Hogan's is probably, when it was most popular, the Stone Cold and the Rocks, and they think fake instead of really, again, peeling back the onion to just understand like
the psychology of it.
Psychology. My favorite match is The Rock and Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania 18. And it's the psychology of what was supposed to happen during the match beforehand, because now there's behind the scenes, they talk about the story, and it was the crowd that dictated the roles that were going to happen. So Hulk Hogan was supposed to be the bad guy, The Rock was supposed to be the good guy. Clearly, the way the crowd was embracing them, the role switched, so they switched midway during their match. And if you watch it with the sound off, the match looks horrible. But if you watch it with the sound on, with the crowd, it's my favorite match because of all those different things, the psychology, the crowd participation. So,
yes. Well, I see where I would give the greatest match to, and this has a lot to do with me watching the behind the scenes. Well, two matches was the match between Macho Man Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat, which was basically considered one of the greatest choreographed matches of all time. And it was. That match was just off the charts, right? Just professional wrestling at its finest. And then everybody may not understand, but I was a huge Mankind fan because I just like Mick Foley. The guy was crazy. There's a place in my heart for crazy. And that Hell in the Cell with him and The Undertaker, because the amount of mental endurance to do the things that they did for that match is just insane. Like, that's a whole nother level.
We had watched that in my living room. My whole family was there, and then my one wrestling friend, he was there before we were going to go out that night. And that might have happened on my birthday. It was around that time, because I remember that was part of the reason we were going out. But I remember we watched that, him getting thrown off that cage. And there was a half thought of, was that supposed to happen?
Right.
And you find out, yes, that was supposed to happen. Obviously, they weren't going to try it or try to rehearse it because of the fall. And then when you hear the story behind the scenes of him climbing back up after, like, the match could have been done after that.
Should have been done. Because he was doggone half dead.
And then he climbs up, and then he gets thrown through the cage and has a concussion. He's out. He's got a tooth coming out, I think.
His top of his lip or his mouth, through the roof of his mouth.
And so they're going to wheel him out. Second time the match should be done. And then he gets off of that gurney and walks back in to finish the match. It's the effort that these folks put on their bodies to entertain people. Now, obviously, there's some selfishness, right? The glory, the money, the fame with that. But the punishment that they put their bodies through to entertain people, to try to live out a dream. Yeah, that's definitely a memorable match.
That's an insane match. Also goes to what is my favorite promo of all time, which is The Rock and Mick Foley, and it was this whole thing, and all I can remember, there's this line, and me and my best friend at the time, Red, and he had this line in here about Mick Foley. You have one ear, I've got two, and it was something. The way that The Rock was on that time, that promo will go down in history to me as the greatest promo ever cut, because it was just ridiculous.
Well, and the story behind that is that it went, like, making up a number, like 10 minutes longer, 20 minutes longer than it was supposed to go. And it ended up being like the highest rated segment at that time. And just, again, there was no physical action happening. It was simply just entertainment. Again, the psychology.
Yes. Oh, I love this topic. Okay. Well, I haven't watched it in a long time. You're still watching right now.
I did watch it last night. And again, when I watch it, I'm more enough familiar because of social media, you can follow along a lot differently than before, where you had to watch to understand. Now you can read kind of the snippets get your high level review. So, I'll have it on. I'll definitely watch tonight. There's certain matches that I'm interested to understand what's going to play out from the story. And then tomorrow is their weekly show, which is normally kind of like the new chapter. And there's always some surprises. So I'm always kind of interested in just, high level and then local shows I go to with my nieces and with my nephews and my brothers. And again, just there's always something that happens at these shows that the three of us will look at each other and we'll start laughing, or we'll be like, ooh, that move looked rough. And just, it's entertainment to me. So.
What's the highlight for this WrestleMania? What's the big?
Oh yeah. So I would say, last night's main event was the Roman Reigns and The Rock. So that was his first foray back into wrestling in like 9 years versus Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. And last night's match, the winner of that match could dictate stipulations for tonight's main event, which will be Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes.
Okay.
So so there's a lot of anticipation of what could happen tonight. There's some rumors that Stone Cold is going to make a surprise appearance to help the babyface ultimately win, similar to how he did against The Rock and Mick Foley back in the days. So there's a lot of rumors happening. And it's unique because the event's happening actually at where the Eagles play. And it's not exactly super warm right now.
Oh,
so
and it's
like
outside arena.
Outside arena, yeah.
Oh, that's serious.
So it's 50 degrees. So luckily there's been no rain. It looked like there's definitely people that were bundled up out there in the stands. And just another, for me, just to kind of put a button in this, the rumor going around, I haven't seen an announcement yet, but the rumor is the next WrestleMania is going to be in Minneapolis next year.
Oh.
So that had perked my ears up. I've never been. And again, honestly, I don't really have the want or means to sit by the ring at a big event like that because of the cost. But to experience it is definitely something that I'm very interested in. So if it is in Minnesota, I think I'll be making a trek.
Okay. That's what we're talking about. Hey, you know what? Call a brother. Might be in on that with you. I might want to experience a WrestleMania. That would be pretty doggone cool. All right. Well, before I wrap up this episode or wrap up this topic, there is one more thing we didn't talk about with wrestling, and I got to bring it up. See what you done did, Juan? You done brought up wrestling. Now we got to talk about wrestling. All right. The part of wrestling that was greatly underestimated that makes it all come together, particularly when you're watching on TV? The announcers. There was nothing better than JR and the King. Those two. That is wrestling announcing royalty. That JR made the whole thing come together with the, oh my God, and the stutter, that there. It was the quality of entertainment.
Well, in his memory, I mean, I know he's still doing it over in another federation right now, part-time, as he's advanced in age, but his calls to this day are being relived on social media where people will put his audio to homemade videos of people having a terrible fall or something, and it'll be these iconic calls that he had in sound bites. So yeah, he's definitely I would think for my brothers who are 4 and 6 years younger than me, that's the duo that they'll always remember. Me, I even go a generation back to
Mean Gene.
Well, Mean Gene, but a Bobby Heenan and a Gorilla Monsoon, where the heel commentator would make these snide comments about the wrestlers, and it just I would laugh. Even as a kid, I remember sitting, in my grandma's living room when we were watching, and I would just laugh at any time that he would run down the good guy. Yeah, just there is something that what's the analogy that they say that they're almost the composers of what's happening.
Yes.
They're telling the story. You're seeing it, but they're really adding this extra visual to it for you.
You know what they are? They're, how a horror flick wouldn't be as scary without the music, without that composition playing in the background. They're the composition of the match. because they get you all excited, and they make that move or that whatever, the rock bottom sounds so much. Oh my God, he got rock bottomed all the way to hell or whatever, right? And that was just like, oh my God, that was just so good. How could you not be into that?
Yeah, no, I would love it. Yeah, that's a great point to call that out, because that is, again, you can watch matches without the sound. It's not the same.
No. All right. Well, is there any last things you'd like to say about this topic?
I would say if you are not a fan, I would say, and you have any chance to go to a local show or go on YouTube, give it a try. There is so much there. It is truly art. There is something out there for everybody in the types of matches, the types of characters that are involved. I just think it's very entertaining, and definitely the era that you watch. If you have little ones, you might want to preview just in case, because it was not always as PG as it has been lately. But no, it's entertainment.
Yes. Yes. And you know what just popped in my head? Wrestling is diversity too. Probably some of the most original for TV.
It absolutely was. I mean, that's one of my favorites back in the day was Junkyard Dog.
Oh, love the Junkyard Dog.
And the diversity in music that I learned back then. Stranglehold by Ted Nugent. You wouldn't think of Ted Nugent as somebody Juan would listen to, but the Von Erichs would come out to a song called Stranglehold. And that's what brings me back. Queen. I found out about Queen because of the Junkyard Dog, because that was his song, Another One Bites the Dust. So it's all of these different layers of characters and songs and different matches, whether you like the high flying, whether you want the psychology, whether you want craziness with tables and chairs and other gimmicks.
Yes.
It is diversity. That's for sure.
Facts. Okay. We're going to start wrapping up this episode. Ooh, I'm not going to lie. I don't know if I have had a topic of the week get me so geeked before, but this one got me because I was feeling that. Kosh listeners, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for giving us your minds and ears. Thank you for caring about another amazing person who's out in our community, making it better, and what they had to say. Learning about another one of our neighbors, super, super important. You already know we are a work in progress. We are trying to become the number one podcast in all of Wisconsin, and I can't do that without you. Help us become better. There's lots of ways you can do that. One way is, please take a moment. If there's something about the show, if there's a new segment idea you might have, or something we can do to improve the show, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Also, if you'd like to be a guest, if you'd like to recommend a guest, I always need that. I always need another amazing guest here on The Kosh. So reach out to us at askthekosh@gmail.com. Once again, that is askthekosh@gmail.com. Also, we are that work in progress who we need you to help us get in front of more eyes and ears. How does that happen? Well, I can't become number one podcast in Wisconsin without you. I need better analytics. What helps while you're listening to this episode, hit the subscribe button. Just take a moment, hit the subscribe button. Also, if you would take another couple of moments and leave us a review, that helps to increase our analytics. The better analytics we got, the more they share the Kosh with more eyes and ears out there. And the more people that learn about us, the more people can learn about this amazing community, all the amazing people in it, and just have a great time enjoying these stories and conversations that we have here on the Kosh. So, all right. So thank you for that. And now on to the real business at hand, which is shout out time. Juan, who do you got for shout outs?
Yeah, so I got three sets of groups. So I'll just say again, the New North folks, definitely shout out for the opportunity to do this DEI work and being able to meet, the community that is out here in our 18 county region, the community that I'm building. So again, folks like you, My man Dan Webster, Charm Dur, I know we're part of a monthly conversation. We're always laughing. I know, shout out to Major as well. I know he's no longer in our region, but just being able to break bread and just have conversations and be able to just be ourselves, like those types of communities, I'm very thankful for. I want to shout out. And then my LPA, again, community, my Latino professional community that we're building. I know you've had a couple of members as former guests, so it's great to hear their episodes. And again, it's a community that I didn't realize I needed, but that I'm thankful to be a part of. And then last but not least, again, give a shout out to my daughter, who's always my inspiration, whether she knows it or not. And then my wife for putting up with me. She definitely is very gracious in the time that I'm out here in the streets doing this work. So thankful for her.
I get that life. All right. So I just want to send a shout out I got this amazing experience yesterday, and I got an opportunity to, for the first time, go to an Asian barbecue place where you're cooking in front of yourself. And so I got an invitation. Big shout out to Fanny for hooking me up with the invitation. Big shout out to Ping, who is owner of this. It's called Molo Asian Barbecue. Oh my God. It was the best experience. It was so good. It was just fun. And I went with my neighbors across the street. Shout out to Mike and Gwen. Those are our partners in crime, and me and the wife and Mike and Gwen. And we sat down and we cooked and laughed and didn't know what we were doing sometimes. And we were just making up. The food was just fantastic. And the whole experience as a whole, the setting. So I just want to give a shout out for the fact that we have this in our region is amazing, but more importantly, thank you for that invitation for me to bring my family and my friends. Ping rolled out the red carpet. Like, it was just fantastic. So if you want to have an amazing experience, go to Molo. It is in the Old Famous Dave's out there by the Appleton Mall. Old Famous Dave's. So want to send a shout out there. Want to send a shout out to the people who lost power this last week. I feel for you, because you know what? You never know. Like, until you lose power, you don't realize all the stuff that runs on power. And they've been out of power. Some people were out of power for a good little minute. So, like, I want to recognize the struggle. Yeah. Send a shout out to my man, Mr. Moen, Mr. Todd Moen, my brother out there. He had some medical things, and hey, bro, I'm just glad that you are better. I'm glad you are back home. Miss you. I'll be by soon to chop it up with you. For real, for real. All right. I want to send a shout out to my girl, Andy Anam, for making it to the 40 under 40. That is a big doggone deal. I want to send a huge shout out to her. That is quite the accomplishment. Look, out here doing these amazing things all the time. I also want to send a shout out to my guy, Oliver, who also made 40 under 40, and also to Hillary out there who made 40 under 40. You know, when they going to make this 51 under 50, I need that, but y'all got to make that soon. So I can get a little bit of love. All right. And shout out to Dr. Miller and their class. Went and gave a presentation there. And look, I keep trying to get in front of people to share the DEI message. And it was super well received. Appreciate the students who gave me the time and their ears and their attention to be part of that. And then last, never least, big shout out to my wife, who continues to let me do this podcast in her house. Thank you, baby. I love you. Thank you for taking care of me as always. So, Juan, we only got one thing left to do, and that is this. It is time for the parting words of wisdom. But you get choices. You get an A, B, and C. First, option A, you can just leave us with some nice parting words of wisdom. Option B, you can tell us, what would Juan today tell 13-year-old Juan about life? Or option C, you can do both. So, Juan, what are we doing?
We're going to do both.
Okay.
I think definitely some of these things that 13-year-old Juan could have heard are still things that maybe a 46, 47-year-old Juan out there could hear. So the first is, and again, I say all these things, I I think when we talk or share guidance, I think sometimes there's this misconception that we ourselves, because we said it, we're doing it 100%. And that's not always the case. I will authentically admit and be transparent that some of these things that I'm sharing are things that I hope to do better at. And, I definitely don't want to come like I'm preaching. But the first would be celebrate your success and wins along the way. Don't get caught up in the grind. I think sometimes we have our nose so down and we're working, and we don't really, sometimes we're at where we wanted to be years ago. And instead of looking back at that, we're looking at what's next. Like, I'm not there yet, but had they looked 5 years ago, they're exceeding where they thought they were going to be. So, try to be mindful and objective about that. Be your own advocate. I learned in my 30s that hard work alone isn't enough. My parents always told me hard work, humble, and I didn't advocate for myself. I didn't raise my hand to say I can be on this team or I can do that project. So that is definitely something that we try to share with our younger professionals. You have to advocate for yourself. Obviously, try to find those folks that can speak for you when you're not in the room, but you have to advocate for yourself. Take advantage of opportunities. I think, don't let fear get in your way of raising your hand. Any sort of opportunities you can take advantage of, whether it's to go to a new restaurant, whether it's to be a part of a team, whether it's to go to an event. Normally there's something that you can pull away from that experience to be like, oh, okay. Like, you don't always have to take everything away. Some things you can put in your pocket for later, but definitely take advantage of opportunities. Definitely as a 13-year-old, there are some things that I didn't raise my hand for that looking back, I'm like, I try to tell I was telling my daughter when she was younger, and then now my nieces and nephews, I'm like, it's a good experience. You should try it out. Like, just try it once. And then the last thing would be remembering that this too shall pass. Sometimes we're in these moments of our lives where nothing can go right or everything just seems like it's terrible, but it's going to pass. And I think if we can keep our mind to say, let me weather the storm, I'm going to make it out of this. Or if things are going great, don't put all your eggs in the basket and think you're going to be riding high like forever. Like, it's going to ebb and flow. So just kind of remembering that life is about ups and downs. Sometimes there are mountains and valleys, but just navigating that. Everything isn't, what's the word? I try to be more tethered than some other people. And I think that, adversity is going to happen, and find your community to help support, but just recognize that it's going to pass. Whether you're going through a bad time, it's going to pass.
All right. That was good stuff. What'd you think, Juan?
I can't imagine. I could not believe how long this has gone, but this has just been natural conversation.
It's the Kosh.
It is.